Today we're going to look at F1 hybrids. So, what is an F1 hybrid plant? What are its advantages and its disadvantages? To understand F1 hybrid plants, we need first to look at what I call normal, conventional plants that you grow in your garden, that you bought from the garden centre, or the seeds that you bought from the garden centre, which don't have the words hybrid or F1 written on the packet. Then we can look at F1s to see what the difference is, and of course the advantages and the disadvantages. So let's start with the first simple diagram. Now, I'm not a genetics expert, and we as gardeners don't need to be, but there are a few little basics that we need to understand. So I've put together a few little diagrams to simplify things and to explain things, I hope, clearly in a digestible manner. So we're going to use tomatoes as an example. So let's take a look at the first diagram. Here in the diagram we see a tomato which is representing the plant of variety A, and the little blue dots represent the genetic material of this plant. We're not going to go into the detail of genes and chromosomes and so on, that's for the genetic experts, but basically this is the material in the plant that actually programs whether it's a plant, a tomato, and what variety of tomato. So here we have variety A. Now we want to pollinate this plant with another tomato of variety A so we can produce more tomatoes. So we need another tomato plant. At pollination, each plant provides a copy of 50% of its genetic material, which is kind of shuffled to pass on through either the pollen or through the ovules of the plants. So pollination, 50% of the genetic material comes from one plant and 50% from the other. Remember this shuffle, which is extremely important when we look at F1s later. So now these two lots of 50%, or half the genes of each parent plant, are reassembled back together to produce 100%, which gives us the seed for our new plant. Now notice both parents are variety A. They only have variety A genetic material, and when recombined we have again 100% variety A, 50% of which comes from one parent and 50% which comes from the other parent, but it's still all variety A. So we can see that varieties in plants are a bit like pedigree with animals. We can take a parallel with dogs, for example. If we take a pedigree Labrador and we mate it with another pedigree Labrador, these two dogs will produce puppies which are Labradors, not poodles or chihuahuas or German shepherds. So that's pure varieties of plants, in this case tomatoes. So now let's take a look at F1s. Why are they different? So, time for another diagram. We're going to start again with our tomato variety A. But this time we're going to pollinate it with a tomato variety B. Again, both plants will do a little shuffle of their genetic material and send a copy of 50% to be combined with the 50% from the other plant to generate our new seed and our new plant. But now the plant is neither A nor B. It's a combination of the genetic material from A and B, so I've called it AB. So this variety AB is simply a cross, and this is the famous F1 hybrid, because hybrid means cross basically, and an F1 is the first generation. So here we have our F1, which has been bred because the people who produce these types of plants can forecast exactly what kind of plant they're going to get, because they have a purified strain of plant A and a purified strain of plant B, so that when they produce AB, every time they'll get the same result. So we now know what an F1 hybrid is. It's simply a cross. Now you're going to say, well, Steve, why didn't you say that in the first place? Why did we go through all these explanations about genetic material and so on? Well, we'll see later why we did that. But basically, we now know that our F1 hybrid is a cross variety. Now, we know what it is, so why do we do it? What are the advantages? Well, it's simple. A lot of these plants are grown because they are particularly strong in a certain way. They are resistant to certain diseases, they're very vigorous, they're highly productive, they produce a lot of fruit or large fruit or whatever. It has usually a feature which is desired by the people that are going to be growing it. They also have a thing called hybrid vigor. These F1s, for reasons I'm not sure anybody really understands fully, are always very, very robust plants, which is exactly what you need in the garden. Or alternatively, if you are a commercial grower, for example, with our example of tomatoes, if you're commercially growing tomatoes, one of the good things about them is they're predictable. If they're all planted at the same time, they will grow at the same speed and they will fruit, and the fruit will mature at the same time. So when it comes to harvest time, you can ensure you have the manpower or the machine power necessary to harvest everything all in one go, rather than it being spread over a long period. So you might say, this sounds wonderful. Why don't we just produce F1 hybrids and grow them all the time? Well, in fact, a lot of farmers and producers do exactly that. But are there any disadvantages? We'll take a look at that, and this is where we need to go back to the diagrams. We're going to take our F1 hybrid, the AB variety, and we're going to cross it with another AB variety, another hybrid. So, as usual, there's a little shuffle of the genetic material, the parent, and then 50% is selected. Now, look at the combination of little dots here, which represent the genetic material. Notice it's nothing like what this AB variety received to become an AB variety. These combine and they produce a completely new sequence of genetic material. So we have a big question mark. What is this? What is it producing? And each time there's a shuffle to produce the genetic material. This combination can produce all sorts of different combinations of genetic material. So we really don't know what we're going to get. Are we going to get little weedy plants? Are we going to get things which are inedible? Are we going to get things which won't even germinate? Who knows? There are a lot of advantages to F1 hybrid plants, as we've seen. But the one downside is if you want to reproduce seeds year after year, then they're best avoided, because you cannot really rely on the results. One little thing I'd like to add. In my examples, I showed 8 little points to, in fact, explain the logic of the genetics. In fact, tomato plants have 31,760 genes. So you can imagine the whole thing is quite a bit more complicated, but the logic remains exactly the same. So either buy F1s and buy every year, or maybe stick to pure varieties and reproduce your own seeds every year and save a little money. The choice is yours.